The first thing Lena Hart noticed was the nausea. Not the soft, manageable kind the pamphlets lied about. Not the delicate little warning women in advertisements seem to survive with a glass of orange juice and a meaningful smile. This was sharp, sudden, and humiliating. It rolled through her body so violently that she had to grip the edge of the communal sink in the women's restroom on the third floor of Halden Hall and breathe through her mouth while fluorescent light buzzed over her head like an accusation. Outside the door, campus kept moving. Shoes across tile, muted voices, laughter from a group of girls who sounded rich enough to never once have checked their bank balance before buying coffee. Inside the stall, Lena closed her eyes and counted backward from 10. She was late for class. She was always late for something now. Late to work, late to breathe, late to answer messages from her mother she no longer knew how to answer without lying. Late to becoming the kind of person who had things under control. When the nausea finally passed enough for her to stand upright without seeing spots, she lifted her head and looked at herself in the mirror. 23. Tired eyes, light brown hair pulled into a loose knot that had partially given up on her 2 hours earlier. One silver hoop in one ear because she had lost the other somewhere between her apartment and the library last week and still hadn't had the emotional energy to care. A soft, oversized sweater hiding the slight curve of her stomach that was, for now, still easy to hide if people weren't looking too closely. No one was looking too closely. That was the one mercy in a place like Blackthorn University. People here noticed labels. Scholarship student, waitress, transfer, wrong shoes, cheap phone, no family name. They noticed difference from a distance and then, politely, academically, beautifully, looked right through it. So no, nobody had noticed yet. Not the pregnancy. Not the fear. Not the fact that Lena Hart was 3 months pregnant, living alone in an off-campus apartment with a leaky radiator and 2 overdue utility bills, taking a full course load because losing even 1 credit would endanger the scholarship keeping her here. And absolutely nobody knew that the father had blocked her number 8 weeks ago after saying, in a voice so calm it made her hate him more, "I just don't think this can be my problem." She rinsed her mouth, splashed cold water on her cheeks, and reached into her bag for concealer she didn't have. Right. Still poor, still pregnant. Still expected in modern political thought in 7 minutes. Lena took a breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped back into the hallway. That was the moment she crashed directly into Professor Eva Mercer. The impact itself wasn't dramatic. A shoulder, books shifting, one of Lena's pens hitting the floor and rolling under a radiator. The humiliation, however, was immediate and total. Because of all the people on campus to collide with while pale, shaky, and 1 bad second away from vomiting again, it had to be her. Professor Mercer was new. Not new in the soft, uncertain way junior faculty usually were, not tentative, not eager to please, not visibly trying to be liked. She had arrived 2 weeks earlier with a visiting appointment in the political theory department and a reputation that had spread through campus before she even finished unpacking her office. Brilliant, severe, impossible. Students said she dressed like she had never once spilled anything on herself in her life, that she spoke in full, precise sentences that made sloppy thinking feel like a misdemeanor, that she was beautiful in a way that made people sit straighter and hate her a little for it, that she had reduced one fourth-year boy to silence in under 30 seconds without ever raising her voice. Lena had seen her only once before this. Across the lecture hall, silver pen in hand, dark hair tucked behind one ear, watching the room with an expression that suggested she could distinguish inattention from fear from laziness at 20 feet. Now she was standing directly in front of her, one arm steadying the stack of books Lena had nearly sent to the floor. dark coat still on despite the overheated building. Pale green eyes taking in Lena's face with unnerving clarity. "I'm sorry," Lena said immediately. "That was my fault." Professor Mercer didn't answer right away. She looked at Lena for one beat too long, then at the restroom door behind her, then back at her face. "Are you all right?" The question was quiet, worse than if it had been sharp. Kindness was harder to survive. Lena forced something that might have looked like a functional smile from a distance. "Fine, just moving fast." Professor Mercer's gaze dropped to the hand Lena still had pressed low against her stomach, then lifted again. The movement was almost imperceptible. It was enough to make Lena's pulse misfire. She moved her hand away at once. "Your pen," Professor Mercer said. Lena blinked. "What?" "The pen." Professor Mercer bent without fuss, reached beneath the radiator, and came back up with Lena's cheap blue pen in one hand. She held it out. Lena took it carefully, as if touching the professor's fingers by accident would somehow expose everything she had worked so hard to keep invisible. "Thank you." "You're late for class," Professor Mercer said. It should have sounded like a reprimand. It didn't. It sounded like an observation by someone who had already noticed the trembling in Lena's hand. Lena swallowed. "Yes." Professor Mercer shifted the books in her own arms. "So am I." Then, to Lena's shock, the corner of her mouth moved very slightly. Not a smile, something more dangerous. The possibility of one. "Walk with me," she said. Lena did, because refusing a professor in the hallway seemed suspicious. Because she was still dizzy. Because there was something in Eva Mercer's voice that made obedience feel less like submission and more like gravity. They walked in silence for 20 steps. The corridor around them emptied and filled again with ordinary campus life. Lena kept waiting for the lecture, the comment about responsibility, the clipped academic reminder about attendance, performance, appearances. Instead, halfway to the classroom door, Professor Mercer said, "If you're unwell, you should go home." Lena looked at her in disbelief. "Excuse me?" "I said," Professor Mercer replied, "if you are unwell, you should go home." "I can't." The answer came too quickly, too honestly. Professor Mercer glanced at her once, sharp and unreadable. "Can't," she repeated. Lena heard herself laugh softly, without humor. "No." A cluster of students passed them then, talking loudly about an internship application. Neither woman moved aside until the last second. When the hallway cleared, Professor Mercer said, "You look as though standing upright is a negotiation. My lecture will survive your absence." Lena should have said thank you. She should have nodded and kept walking. Instead, she said, "Some of us don't get to take sick days just because we look terrible." The line landed harder than she intended. For 1 second, Professor Mercer just looked at her. Not angry, not offended, just very, very attentive. Then she said, quietly, "No, I suppose some of us do not." And because Lena was tired, because she was pregnant, because she had not slept more than 4 consecutive hours in weeks, and the pressure inside her chest had started to feel like another organ, she blurted the stupidest possible thing. "I'm not trying to be difficult." Professor Mercer's expression softened by such a small degree it would have been easy to miss if Lena weren't already watching for signs of danger. "I know," she said. Then she opened the lecture hall door, stepped aside to let Lena enter first, and added, "Sit near the aisle." Lena paused. "Why?" "So you won't have to climb over anyone if you need to leave quickly." The kindness of that, so practical, so unadorned, so utterly unlike pity, hit her with enough force to feel almost cruel. She went into class. She sat near the aisle, and when the nausea came back 32 minutes later, sharp and sudden, she left without apologizing, because Professor Mercer did not look at her as she went, and somehow that felt like permission. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. By the following Thursday, Professor Mercer had become a problem. Not because she was unkind, that would have been easier. A cruel professor could be filed under things to endure, things to avoid, things to resent productively between shifts and study sessions. Professor Mercer was a problem because she was impossible to place. She lectured with cold precision and never once simplified herself for the room. She dressed in dark wool and sharp lines and looked like the kind of woman who had never had to ask anyone for help in her life. She corrected weak arguments with the gentlest possible tone, which only made the humiliation more complete for the boys who came into class in expensive jackets, assuming confidence was the same thing as intellect. And then there were the small things. The way she always left a bottle of water on the front desk now, though she never drank from it herself. The way she paused once while handing back response papers, long enough to murmur to Lena, "You forgot your lunch," and slide a banana from her own satchel onto the desk, as if this were a perfectly normal thing for a professor to do. The way she never embarrassed Lena when she slipped out of class early. The way she seemed, somehow, to know exactly when she needed to. Lena did not know what to do with any of that. She was good with systems, not because she liked them, because she had spent most of her life surviving them. Financial aid systems, course registration systems, food service schedules, landlord systems. The emotional systems of men who promised things they only meant as long as the cost remained theoretical. Kindness without performance, however, remained harder to catalog. So she told herself it meant nothing. Professor Mercer was observant. That was all. Maybe she was kind to everyone. Maybe Lena only noticed because she had become so accustomed to being handled roughly by life that gentleness felt like a structural anomaly. That explanation lasted until the knock on her apartment door. It happened on a Sunday evening. Cold rain, bad light, the radiator hissing like an insult. Lena, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her laptop open, trying to calculate whether she could pay the electric bill this month and still afford the prenatal vitamins the clinic nurse had told her not to skip. Her apartment was not the kind of place professors visited. Technically, students were not supposed to give faculty their home addresses, and faculty were definitely not supposed to appear there uninvited with a paper grocery bag in one hand and rain in their hair. So when the knock came, 3 measured taps, not apologetic, not aggressive, Lena assumed it was her landlord or a mistake. She opened the door and forgot, for one bright second, how to speak. Professor Eva Mercer stood in the hallway, under the weak yellow apartment light, dark coat damp at the shoulders, one leather glove still on, the other folded into the hand holding the bag. Lena stared. Professor Mercer stared back with that same composed, careful attention that made lying feel like amateur work. "Good evening," she said. Lena's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "Professor," "I know," Professor Mercer said. "This is irregular." "I live here," Lena replied, because apparently under stress her brain now specialized in the least useful sentence available. A pause. Then Professor Mercer said, with unbearable calm, "I had noticed." Lena looked at the grocery bag, then at the professor, then back at the bag. "What are you doing here?" Professor Mercer lifted it slightly. "You left your response paper in my office." Lena blinked. "You came here for a paper?" "No." The honesty of it landed like a hand on the back of her neck. Professor Mercer continued. "You also left class on Friday looking pale enough to concern the dead, and this afternoon I discovered your essay in my mail slot with dried tea on one corner and no lunch stain, which suggests you are either recovering or too poor to spill tea without regretting it." Lena stared at her, then at the bag again. "What's in there?" "A loaf of bread, tinned soup, fruit, crackers, ginger tea, and the only brand of plain yogurt sold within walking distance of campus that does not taste punitive." Lena's face burned. "Professor..." "Eva," she said quietly. "Not here." The correction was more intimate than it should have been. Lena tightened her grip on the edge of the door. "This is inappropriate." "Yes," Eva said. "Probably." "Probably?" "I am trying not to frighten you by pretending this is less deliberate than it is." Rain ticked softly against the hallway window at the far end. The radiator hissed. Lena's heart beat hard enough to qualify as a second set of footsteps. "You don't even know me," she said. Eva looked at her in a way that made the sentence feel flimsy before it finished landing. "No," she said, "but I know hunger when I see it, and exhaustion, and whatever particular form of pride makes a woman spend $7 on coffee across a week and then pretend she is not skipping meals." The shock of being understood so specifically made anger the only available defense. "You've been watching me?" Ava's face altered just slightly. "Only when you are difficult not to worry about." That sentence should have sent Lena running. Instead, it unsteadied something lower and more private. She looked away first, past Ava's shoulder, into the dim hallway, anywhere but at the expression on the professor's face that was somehow both controlled and unmistakably real. "I can't pay you back," she said. Ava held out the bag. "I did not ask you to." The hallway seemed too small for what passed silently between them then. Lena's humiliation, her gratitude, the unbearable tenderness of being seen precisely where she was most determined to remain invisible. Finally, she stepped aside. "5 minutes," she said. Ava entered like a woman who understood thresholds, not cautiously, respectfully. Her eyes moved once over the apartment, taking in the peeling paint near the kitchenette, the stack of textbooks by the sofa, the folded cafe uniform over the radiator, the medical pamphlet on the table Lena had forgotten to turn face down. They stopped there, on the pamphlet. Prenatal nutrition in first and second trimester. The silence that followed was very complete. Lena could hear the rain, her own pulse, the refrigerator humming badly. When Eva looked at her again, her face had changed. Not shock, not judgment. Something quieter and somehow worse. Understanding. Lena folded her arms over herself instinctively. "As you can see," she said, brittle enough to cut on, "things are going well." Eva set the grocery bag down on the tiny table. Then, after a pause that gave Lena every chance to flee and did not force her, she asked very softly, "How far along?" Lena hated the relief she felt at the question being practical. 12 weeks. Eva nodded once. No visible surprise. No lecture. No horror. Have you seen a doctor? Yes. Do you have support? Lena laughed before she could stop herself. A sharp, ugly sound. Eva's expression did not change, but something in her shoulders tightened. That bad, she said. Lena looked at the floor. Worse, probably. Another silence. Then Eva removed her coat, draped it carefully over the back of the chair, and said, with the same impossible calm she used in lectures, "Then we need to make a list." Lena blinked. A what? A list, Eva repeated. Rent, food, appointments, course load, work schedule, anything likely to collapse first. Panic is inefficient. We need specifics. Lena stared at her as if she had briefly begun speaking another language. You can't just... I can, actually. Eva moved a stack of books from one chair to another and sat down at Lena's table like she had always belonged there. Not arrogantly, not carelessly, simply with the assurance of a woman who had decided that staying on the threshold would now be a form of cowardice. Lena remained standing. I don't understand you, she said. Eva folded her hands over each other. That makes two of us. The line was dry enough to almost qualify as wit. Lena hated that part of her noticed. I'm serious. So am I. Eva looked up. Sit down, Lena. It was the first time she had said her name outside the classroom. The effect of it was not proportionate. Lena sat, because she was too tired not to. Because a list was absurd. Because if she did not sit down and let this woman direct even 10% of the disaster, she was going to start crying, and that would be unforgivable. They made the list. Rent, utilities, clinic appointment in 11 days, work shifts at the campus cafe, 3 course deadlines, 1 group presentation Lena had quietly hoped to disappear from due to divine intervention, transportation, food, fatigue. The fact that she had not told a single person in her program because scholarship students with visible complications became cautionary tales with astonishing speed. Eva wrote everything down in neat, severe handwriting on the back of a departmental memo, and did not once ask a question that implied judgment. Only logistics. Only care disguised as structure. When the list was finished, she tapped the paper with one finger. This, she said, looks terrible. Lena let out a startled laugh. Thank you. I worked really hard on it. Eva looked at her for one measured second. Then the corner of her mouth shifted, this time unmistakably. It changed everything. Not in a grand way, not in the way love stories usually lie about, but in the quiet apartment under bad yellow light, with soup on the table and rain at the window, Lena saw the first crack in the professor's composure and understood immediately that she was in much more trouble than pregnancy alone had prepared her for. Over the next 2 weeks, Eva Mercer became a pattern, not an intrusion, something more dangerous, a habit. She never overstepped in obvious ways, never arrived without texting first after that initial, impossible evening, never used Lena's pregnancy as a lever or a pity point, never once treated her like a case study in poor choices. Instead, she began doing small, devastating things. Leaving a thermos of ginger tea in the department office refrigerator with a note that said only, "For the student who keeps nearly fainting in political thought." No signature, no flourish. The handwriting gave her away. emailing a revised reading list after class with certain texts quietly marked optional, as though the reduction in workload had occurred by pure administrative accident. Pausing outside the cafe when Lena worked late and asking, in a voice so neutral nobody in line noticed anything, "Have you eaten something not fried in the last 6 hours?" Walking her to the clinic on Tuesday mornings under the excuse that she happened to be going in the same direction, despite the fact that the faculty lot and the Women's Health Center were not in any world on the same route. It should have been unbearable. It was. That was the problem. Because Lena did not know how to receive care that did not come with shame built into it. She did not know what to do with a woman who saw every weak seam in her life and approached them not like opportunities, but like places where reinforcement might be possible. And she definitely did not know what to do with the fact that Professor Eva Mercer was, beneath all the composure, terribly beautiful in private light. Not the distant kind of beauty students talked about after lectures, not the formal version in dark blazers and controlled posture. The real one. The one with her hair loose at the ends of long days. The one that appeared when she took off her coat in Lena's apartment and rolled up her sleeves to unpack groceries or compare calendars, or stir soup that was not very good, but somehow tasted like safety anyway. The one that looked younger when she laughed, which she did rarely enough to make each occurrence feel like privileged information. Lena tried not to notice. She failed almost immediately. "Stop looking at me like I'm a puzzle," Lena said one evening from the sofa, Mies tucked under a blanket, while Eva stood at the stove pretending canned tomato soup could be elevated by discipline. Eva glanced over her shoulder. "You are a puzzle. I am a woman trying not to throw up on a borrowed blanket." "Yes," Eva said, "a very complicated one." Lena stared at the back of her head. That sounded flirtier than was probably ethical. Eva turned off the burner, set down the spoon, then looked at her with a face so composed it became, somehow, intimate. "I am trying very hard," she said, "not to be inappropriate with you." Lena forgot how breathing worked. Outside, rain moved lightly over the glass. The radiator clicked twice like punctuation. Inside the apartment, neither woman moved. Finally, Lena managed, "How's that going?" Eva's eyes lowered once to the blanket over Lena's knees, then rose again. "Poorly." That should have been the moment Lena pushed her away. The moment she remembered reality. Professor, student, campus, risk. The 1,000 ways women like her got punished for being wanted in the wrong direction. Instead, she said, because self-preservation had apparently left the building, "Good." The silence after that was not safe. It was, however, magnificent. Nothing happened. Not that night. Eva served the soup. Lena ate half of it and apologized for the other half. Eva stayed until the nausea passed. Then she left with her coat buttoned up to the throat and an expression so carefully neutral it became almost tender. Lena stood at the door after she was gone and pressed her forehead to the wood. She was pregnant, alone, still broke, still one bad month from academic collapse, and now, for reasons no amount of common sense could explain, she wanted her professor with an intensity that made all of those original problems seem almost administrative by comparison. The first person Lena told was not June, her older sister, not her mother, and certainly not the father. It was Miriam from the cafe. Miriam was 31, divorced, mean in useful ways, and incapable of pretending not to see what was in front of her face. She found Lena in the back room one Wednesday afternoon, sitting on an overturned milk crate and trying to tie her apron while breathing through the kind of nausea that made her eyes water. You look like death, but less rested, Miriam said. Lena, too tired to lie with any elegance, looked up and said, I'm pregnant. Miriam blinked once, twice. Then she sat down on the crate opposite Lena and said, Okay. Lena burst into tears from the sheer mercy of not being asked why first. By the time the crying stopped, Miriam knew most of it. Not Eva, not yet. Lena kept that part protected, hidden in a place inside herself that still felt too fragile to expose to daylight. But the basics, yes. The fear, the scholarship, the father's disappearance, the fact that she was now measuring the future in trimesters and tuition deadlines. Miriam listened without interruption, handed over paper towels from the supply shelf, and finally said, Do you want practical help or emotional lies? Lena laughed wetly. Practical. Good. Emotional lies are expensive, and I don't work for free. Miriam drove her to the discount pharmacy after shift. She bullied her into buying the vitamins. She began handing her half of whatever lunch she brought on days when Lena looked particularly green. She also, after exactly 1 week of observation, narrowed her eyes and asked, Who's the woman? Lena nearly swerved her tray into a customer. There is no woman. Miriam made a face. You say that like someone who is thinking about one constantly. I'm not. Then why did you just stare at the faculty table like it personally insulted you? Lena followed her line of sight. Across the cafe, at a corner table beneath the window, Eva Mercer sat alone with a book open beside a cup of black coffee she had forgotten to drink while grading. Dark coat folded over the chair, reading glasses low on her nose, one hand at her temple. Lena looked away too late. Miriam inhaled sharply. Absolutely not! It's not like that. That sentence means it is exactly like that. Lena wiped down the espresso machine with more force than necessary. Nothing is happening. Miriam watched her. Does she know? Lena stopped. What? About the baby. Lena looked down at the cloth in her hand. Yes. And she still looks at you like that? Lena's head snapped up. Like what? Miriam's expression turned devastatingly calm. Like she's already rearranged parts of her life around whether you're okay. Lena said nothing, which, unfortunately, was answer enough. The clinic appointment 11 days later changed everything. Not because something was wrong, because something was real. Eva met her outside the Women's Health Center in a charcoal coat and soft, dark scarf, carrying 2 coffees and a bag of plain crackers, as if she had been taking nervous pregnant women to appointments all her life. You didn't have to come, Lena said the moment she saw her. Eva handed her the smaller coffee. I know. I mean it. I know, Eva repeated. They went inside together. The waiting room was painted in a color someone had probably intended to call calming and had instead achieved only resignation. A television mounted in the corner played a cooking show with the subtitles on. 3 other women waited, with partners or mothers or phones they clung to like flotation devices. Lena signed in, sat down, immediately wanted to leave. Eva took the chair beside her without asking whether she should. Not presumptuous. Present. Lena kept her eyes on the floor tiles. I hate this. Eva held the crackers out. I know. Lena took one because refusing small care had become harder around this woman. When her name was called, she stood too fast and the room tilted. Eva's hand touched the inside of her elbow, only briefly. and steadied the world before it could announce what was happening to anyone else. The ultrasound room was cold, clinical, too bright. Lena lay back and fixed her eyes on the ceiling because it seemed easier than looking directly at the machine, the screen, the technician, the life she still had not found language for. "Would you like someone to stay with you?" the technician asked. Lena opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Eva answered before she could drown in indecision. "Yes," she said. "If Lena wants me to." Lena turned her head. There it was again. That impossible quality Eva had, making an offer feel like the opposite of pressure. "Yes," Lena whispered. Eva moved closer, not to the bed, to the chair near her shoulder, near enough that Lena could see her if she needed to, without having to look directly into the machine. The gel was cold. The room went quiet. Then the screen shifted, and there it was. Small, unmistakably there. A shape inside her body that had, until now, remained mostly terror, mostly nausea, mostly billable future. The sound came next. Fast, tiny. A heartbeat. Lena broke. She didn't mean to, didn't do it prettily. Just one breath and then tears all at once, hot and immediate, one hand flying to her mouth as if she could hold the emotion in by force. Eva did not say anything. She only reached for Lena's free hand and held it. That was all. No speech, no sentimental claim over a moment that wasn't hers. Just her hand, warm and sure, around Lena's fingers, while the heartbeat filled the room with proof. The technician smiled the practiced smile of someone who had watched women's lives change in small white rooms for years and knew better than to intrude. When it was over, Eva walked her out, sat her down on a bench near the entrance, and pressed a paper cup of water into her hand. Lena looked at her through the remnants of crying. "You held my hand." Eva looked down at her own gloveless fingers, as if verifying the accusation. "Yes. That was..." Lena swallowed. "A lot." Eva's expression softened in a way that made Lena feel suddenly, desperately exposed. "I know," she said. "I'm sorry." "No!" Lena shook her head quickly. "Don't be." Eva held her gaze. The city moved around them. Cars, voices, a bus braking at the curb. None of it mattered. Lena looked down at the sonogram print in her shaking hand, then back at Eva. "You really shouldn't be this kind to me." Eva's mouth shifted, not quite smiling. "I suspect," she said quietly, "you underestimate how difficult you make that." Lena's breath caught. Eva stood too soon after, as if she had said enough and any more would become reckless. She drove Lena home anyway. The whole way they talked about nothing dangerous at all. Traffic, a terrible student essay on Rousseau, whether soup could be considered a food group if it appeared often enough. But the hand-holding remained between them, bright and impossible. And that night, alone in her apartment, sonogram print on the table and one palm resting over her stomach, Lena thought two things at once. The first was, I am really having this baby. The second was worse. I think I'm already in love with her. After that, the line between them stopped pretending to be academic. Not publicly, never stupidly. In class, Eva remained Professor Mercer, distant enough for propriety, precise enough for no one to suspect the degree to which Lena had begun measuring whole days around the possibility of seeing her face soften in private. But everywhere else, the truth started showing through. A gloved hand on Lena's lower back while guiding her through an icy patch outside the library. A text at 6:43 a.m. Eat something before your shift. This is not a philosophical suggestion. A second key to Eva's office, offered without comment, the week Lena admitted the cafe's storage room smell had become unbearable, and she needed somewhere quiet between classes. Lena used it once, then every day. Eva's office became a shelter before it became anything else. Warm radiator, bookshelves lined in ruthless neatness, one battered leather chair by the window, a throw blanket Eva pretended was for drafts, though the heating worked perfectly well. A locked drawer with crackers, ginger candies, ibuprofen, and a stash of instant oatmeal packets that Lena absolutely did not cry over the first time she found them. Sometimes Eva was there, sometimes not. Either way, the room held her. The scent of clean paper, expensive vanilla hand cream, black coffee, and something cooler beneath it that Lena increasingly thought of, with hopeless accuracy, as simply Eva. The first time Eva found her asleep there, it was raining. Lena had meant only to sit down for 15 minutes before her afternoon seminar. Instead, she woke 2 hours later with a wool blanket over her and the weak autumn light gone gray at the window. Eva sat behind her desk, reading. No performance of not watching, no false surprise, just there. Glasses low on her nose, one ankle crossed over the other. Lena pushed herself upright too quickly. Oh my God! Eva looked up from the page. Good afternoon. I fell asleep. Yes. In your office? Yes. That's deeply inappropriate. Eva considered that. Probably. Lena dragged a hand through her hair. Why didn't you wake me? Because you were exhausted. That's not a real policy. It is in this office. Lena stared at her, then at the blanket around her shoulders, then back. You can't keep doing this. Eva closed her book. What exactly am I doing? Lena opened her mouth. Too many correct answers. Feeding her, watching her, making space, being careful with her in ways no one had been careful in a very long time. Looking at her sometimes like she was trying not to. Instead, she said the smallest true thing. You make it hard to remember how alone I'm supposed to be. The room went perfectly still. Eva did not move for such a long beat that Lena wondered if she had finally done it, finally said the one thing that would send this whole impossible arrangement back into polite ruin. Then Eva stood, walked around the desk, stopped in front of the chair. Lena, she said quietly, who told you that aloneness was a moral requirement? Lena laughed once, sharp and broken. Nobody had to. It's just how it works. Eva crouched in front of her. The movement was so unexpected, so intimate in its gentleness, that Lena forgot everything she'd planned to protect. No, Eva said. It is how cruelty works. That is not the same thing. Lena looked at her. Looked at this impossible woman in a dark turtleneck on the worn rug of her own office, meeting her eye at the exact level where lies became difficult. Something in Lena gave way. I'm scared all the time, she whispered. Eva's face changed. Not shock, not pity, something lower, fiercer. I know. No, I don't think you do. The words spilled now, unstoppable. I'm scared of money. I'm scared of the baby. I'm scared of failing out. I'm scared that if I tell my mother, she'll make this about God and punishment and bad timing, and somehow I'll end up comforting her. I'm scared I'm going to love this baby so much I'll ruin both of us by not being enough. And She stopped. Eva waited. Lena looked at the floor. I'm scared of you, too. Eva was very still. Why? Lena laughed helplessly through tears she had not felt arriving. Because you're kind to me like it hurts. Because every time you knock on my door, or leave food in my office chair, or hold my hand in a clinic, I think maybe I could lean on it, on you. And I don't know how to survive if that disappears too. There. It was out. Ugly. Honest. Unfixable. Eva reached up very slowly, as if approaching something easily frightened, and touched the side of Lena's face with the backs of her fingers. Barely there. Permission, not possession. It will not disappear because you named it, she said. Lena closed her eyes. The touch was light enough to survive, devastating enough to stay. When she opened her eyes again, Eva had not moved away. This was the part, Lena thought dimly, where one of them should do something sensible. Stand up, mention the weather, say office hours are over, reinvent the room as a purely administrative environment, and survive on self-denial until graduation. Instead, Lena whispered, "Tell me to stop looking at you like this." Ava's gaze dropped to her mouth and stayed there one dangerous second too long. "No," she said. Then, Lena kissed her. It wasn't reckless. That was the frightening part. It felt inevitable in the way certain truths feel when they have been waiting more patiently than you have. Ava made a sound, small, surprised, and immediately swallowed by the kiss itself, and one hand came to the back of Lena's neck while the other stayed exactly where it was, at her face, as if even now she meant to be careful with every inch of this. The kiss was soft, softer than Lena was prepared for, not hungry, not abrupt, not the kind that tries to prove anything. It felt instead like permission to stop bracing, like being chosen in a language her body understood before her mind did. When they parted, Eva did not move far. Her forehead touched Lena's for one suspended second. "This," Eva said, breath still uneven, "is a very bad idea." Lena let out a broken laugh. "You say that like I don't know." Eva's thumb brushed once over the line of her cheekbone. "I have wanted to do that for weeks." The confession landed low and warm and dangerous. Lena swallowed. "That doesn't help." "No," Eva said softly. "It probably doesn't." They should have stopped there. They did not. Nothing about what followed was explicit in the ugly way people mean when they say desire, as if intimacy is only real once it becomes spectacle. It was not spectacle. It was tenderness, sharpened by restraint. A hand at Lena's waist, Eva kneeling beside the chair while Lena sat forward, fingers in dark hair, kissing this composed, impossible woman who had somehow become the safest place in her week. The astonishing sweetness of being touched by someone who was trying, actively, not to frighten her with how much she felt. When it was over, they sat on the office floor side by side because neither of them trusted their legs. Rain still moved at the window. The campus bell struck 4. Time, incredibly, continued. "We need rules," Eva said after a long while. Lena laughed weakly. That's the least sexy sentence anybody's ever said to me after making out. Eva, to Lena's delight, actually smiled. Nevertheless, all right, rules. No lies, Eva said. Not about the baby, not about money, not about needing help. Lena looked sideways at her. You start with impossible ones. Eva reached for her hand without looking and folded their fingers together. Aiming high has worked out beautifully so far. Lena let that settle in her chest. Then, softly, and what do I call you now? Eva finally looked at her. The office, the rain, the impossible tenderness of the afternoon made her seem younger and older at once. Eva, she said. Only Eva. Outside class, outside campus if possible, in private always. Lena nodded. Okay. Another pause. Then Eva added, lower, and when you are afraid, you tell me before you carry it alone long enough to make a religion of suffering. Lena stared, then leaned over and kissed her again because, really, at that point, what else was there to do with a sentence like that? For a while, happiness made them stupid. Not recklessly stupid. Tender stupid. The kind that comes from discovering that a thing you had only allowed yourself to want in private has entered the room and begun setting down groceries, changing your calendar, and learning exactly how you take your tea. Eva started sleeping over at Lena's apartment one night a week, then two, usually under practical pretexts. The weather was bad, Lena had an early clinic appointment, the radiator had failed again, and Eva's building had power and working heat, and a guest room she did not pretend Lena would ever use instead of her bed. They built a private life carefully. Not because they were ashamed, because the world remained what it was. A university, a pregnancy, a professor, a student 1 year from graduation, with too much at stake to survive scandal gracefully. So in public, they became disciplined. A little too disciplined. Miriam noticed immediately. You look less miserable, she said one afternoon behind the cafe counter. That's rude. It's accurate. Miriam narrowed her eyes. Also, you've started using expensive hand cream. Lena nearly dropped a stack of paper cups. I have not. Miriam stepped closer, took Lena's wrist, sniffed the back of her hand, and went very still. Oh my God. Lena yanked her arm back. Lower your voice. Miriam's grin spread slowly, beautifully, catastrophically. It's the professor, isn't it? Lena shut her eyes. That was answer enough. Miriam slapped the counter once in silent delight. I knew it. She is not. You smell like expensive restraint and moral conflict. That is not a smell. It absolutely is. Miriam leaned in. Is she good to you? Lena opened her mouth with a dozen sarcastic evasions prepared. Instead, what came out was the truth. Yes. Miriam's expression changed. Not teasing now. Steady. Protective in its own rough-edged way. Then I'll only threaten her a little. Weena laughed so hard she had to hold the espresso machine to stay upright. The pregnancy advanced. Slowly, then all at once. At 16 weeks, Lena's body began demanding things with a confidence she deeply resented. Food, immediately. Sleep at impossible times. An absolute inability to tolerate the smell of the philosophy building basement for reasons no medical professional could explain. Her stomach rounded enough that loose sweaters stopped feeling like camouflage and started feeling like evidence. A few classmates noticed. No one asked directly. Blackthorn was too polite for that, which was just another form of cowardice in better shoes. Eva noticed everything. The way Lena sat differently now. The point in the day when her lower back began to ache. How she held stair rails longer on bad mornings. The way anxiety spiked whenever other people looked even a second too long. One evening, after Lena snapped at a group project partner for saying, "Maybe motherhood will give you perspective," she locked herself in the department restroom and cried from sheer exhaustion. Eva found her 10 minutes later, because of course she did. There was no dramatic entrance, only a soft knock, then Eva's voice through the door. "Lena, open it." "I'm fine." "No, you are not." Lena pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. "Go away." "Absolutely not." There was such crisp certainty in the reply that Lena laughed helplessly in spite of herself. That tiny break in the misery betrayed her. The lock clicked a second later because Eva, infuriatingly, had somehow obtained the master key from building services months ago and apparently felt no ethical conflict about using it in emotional emergencies. The door opened. Eva came in, closed it behind her, took one look at Lena's face and said, with quiet fury, "Who was it?" Lena stared at her. "What?" "Who upset you?" The protectiveness in Eva's voice was not theatrical. That made it infinitely more destabilizing. Lena shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "It matters if you are crying in a bathroom because someone decided your body is public property." Lena looked at her sharply. "How did you know that's what it was?" Eva's mouth hardened. "Because I have worked in universities a long time." The answer contained more history than it explained. Lena wanted to ask about it. Instead, she burst into tears again from the terrible relief of not needing to explain. Eva crossed the room and gathered her carefully into her arms. Not fast, not as if crying itself required correction. Just enough. Just there. Lena clung to the front of her coat and cried until the humiliation passed into something closer to grief. "Sometimes," Lena admitted into the fabric at Eva's shoulder, "it feels like everyone can see it before I'm ready." Eva's hand moved slowly over the middle of her back. "I know. I hate that. I know. I hate that I need so much." At that, Eva drew back just enough to look at her. Her eyes were clear, direct, impossible to hide from. "You do not need too much," she said. "You need exactly what any woman in your position would need. The fact that the world trained you to apologize for it is not your failure." Lena looked at her, tears cooling on her cheeks, and thought again with private terror, "I am going to lose my mind over this woman." By winter break, everyone knew something was happening. Not the precise shape of it, not enough to become useful gossip, but atmosphere travels. Care shows. And there was no hiding the fact that Professor Eva Mercer had become unusually invested in one particular student's continued existence. The rumors were vague, protective, mostly wrong. Fortunately, wrong rumors often protect the truth by making it sound too strange to be real. "She's mentoring her for grad school," one girl in Lena's seminar whispered. "During a pregnancy?" her friend whispered back. "Maybe especially during a pregnancy." Lena, 3 rows ahead of them, pressed her lips together so hard they hurt. Eva did not look up from her notes, but when class ended, she said, Miss Hart, a moment. Lena waited while the room cleared, then shut the door, then turned. Eva held up 2 envelopes. Your scholarship renewal forms. Lena frowned. They're early. Yes? You did something. Eva's expression remained composed. That is such an ugly way to phrase gratitude. Lena crossed her arms. Eva? That got the full, smallest smile. A private one. One not meant for the classroom at all. I made inquiries, Eva said, quietly. Your advisor was negligent. The paperwork should have been initiated 3 weeks ago. It is now corrected. Lena stared at the envelopes, then at Eva, then back. You can't keep saving me. The room went quiet. Eva set the forms down on the desk with deliberate care. What would you prefer I do? She asked. Watch? The question held no accusation, only truth. And the truth was that Lena did not want that. Did not want distance. Did not want admiration from afar or careful professional helplessness. She wanted this woman in the mess of it with her. That was the problem. That was also the answer. So Lena stepped around the desk, reached for Eva's hand, and placed it without warning over the gentle curve of her stomach. Time stopped. Eva inhaled. Not dramatically, just enough to betray the depth of it. Lena's own pulse thudded in her ears. The baby had not moved yet, not in a way she could feel with certainty, but the warmth of Eva's palm there, reverent and stunned, transformed the room into something sacred and frightening and real. Eva looked at her with an expression Lena had never seen before. Not composure, not care, not even desire, though that was there too. Something softer than all of it. Awe. I wanted, Eva said very quietly, to ask if I could. Lena's throat tightened. I know. Eva's hand remained there a second longer. Then she withdrew it with visible reluctance and closed her fingers slowly, as if memorizing the shape of what she had touched. Lena could not speak. Neither could Eva. Which was how Miriam found them 10 seconds later when she barged into the room holding a forgotten scarf and announced, If this is another emotionally devastating silence, I'd prefer warning. Lena let out a noise halfway between a laugh and a groan. Eva, to her everlasting credit, only said, Miss Alvarez, your timing is prehistoric. Miriam stopped, looked between them once, clocked everything, smiled like the devil at brunch. I'm going to pretend I saw nothing, she said, and backed out of the room with theatrical mercy. The baby kicked for the first time in February. Lena was in Eva's kitchen, a proper kitchen, unlike the apartment kitchenette she had learned to loathe. Real light, real shelves, copper pans she suspected existed because somebody in Eva's family had once believed in heirlooms. Snow at the window. Soup on the stove because apparently pregnancy had made Lena cyclical in her cravings, and tomato soup had become holy again. She stopped mid-sentence, looked down, put her hand to her stomach. Eva, slicing bread at the counter, went still. What? Lena laughed once, stunned beyond language. Then it happened again. A flutter, a tiny, impossible movement from somewhere inside the future. Oh my God. Eva set the knife down immediately and crossed the room, not hurriedly, not wanting to overwhelm the moment by reaching too fast. Lena looked up at her, face bright with disbelief. She moved. Eva's expression changed at once. That same awe from the classroom desk, deeper now, more helpless. "May I?" she asked. Lena caught her hand and guided it into place. They stood like that in the kitchen, both women silent, waiting for another movement from a person neither of them had met, and both of them had already reorganized pieces of themselves around. When it came, Eva closed her eyes, only for a second, but Lena saw it. Saw the exact moment love, already enormous between them, changed shape again. "She likes you," Lena whispered. Eva opened her eyes and looked at her with so much quiet feeling in her face that Lena nearly had to look away. "I very much hope," Eva said. "The feeling is mutual." That night, in Eva's bed, with snow making the city outside look almost clean, Lena lay with one hand over her stomach and Eva's arm around her waist and thought, this is what safety should have felt like the whole time. Which was, unfortunately, also when trouble arrived. It came in the form of Dean Halverson, a man with polished glasses and the exact smile of someone who had spent 20 years weaponizing concern. He requested a meeting with Lena and her advisor regarding academic continuity planning. Lena knew a threat when it wore a tie. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 3. She told Eva that morning while sitting in the office chair with her shoes off and ankles swollen enough to make life feel personally insulting. Eva listened without interrupting, then said, "You will not attend that meeting alone." Lena looked up. "Eva, no." The word was quiet, final. "You will not sit in a room with that man and let him explain your own body back to you as a retention problem." Lena tried for humor. "You make him sound villainous." Eva's expression did not change. "I make him sound accurately administrative." The meeting went badly. Not disastrously. Worse. Politely. Dean Halverson suggested reduced enrollment, remote alternatives, a temporary leave framed as support, a year to adjust to changing personal circumstances. Lena sat very straight and listened to a man with a fountain pen explain, in language clean enough to survive litigation, that her pregnancy had made her academically inconvenient. Then Eva spoke. Lena had seen her dismantle weak theory in lecture halls. She had seen her calm students, handle bureaucrats, navigate discomfort with terrifying precision. She had never seen this. It was not loud. That would have given them too much comfort. Eva simply began asking questions. Very specific ones. About policy. About scholarship protections. About discrimination language in the Student Continuity Charter, about whether the university routinely suggested withdrawal to students experiencing pregnancy, temporary disability, grief, or financial instability, and if so, whether they would like that pattern documented for external review. By minute 6, Dean Halverson was sweating. By minute 10, Lena's advisor was pretending to have always been supportive. By minute 14, the entire tone of the room had shifted from institutional guidance to legal caution. When it ended, Lena stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall because her knees had become decorative. Eva came out 2 seconds later. "That," Lena said faintly, "was one of the hottest things I've ever seen." Eva blinked. Then, stunningly, laughed. A real laugh. Hand to the bridge of her nose, composure fully breached for one glorious second. "Lena, I'm serious. You are impossible. And you're in love with me, so I feel that problem is now shared custody." Eva looked at her. long enough to make the hallway disappear. Yes, she said. Lena's breath caught. The joke fell away. Ava took one step closer. Did you hear me? Lena nodded, because speech, quite frankly, had abandoned her. Ava's voice dropped lower. I am in love with you. No dramatic music, no audience, no perfect weather, just a university hallway, fluorescent light, Lena's swollen ankles, and a woman in a dark coat saying the one thing Lena had wanted and feared in equal measure. Lena started crying on the spot. Ava's expression turned instantly alarmed. That was not the intended result. Lena laughed through the tears. Pregnancy has made me very unprofessional. Ava held her face gently in both hands. That is not the explanation I would choose. What would you choose? Ava's thumbs brushed away the tears under Lena's eyes. Happiness, she said. Lena kissed her in the empty hallway, because at that point, the universe could either cope or get over itself. The last month of the pregnancy was terrible. And holy. Lena swelled, wobbled, cried at an ad for winter oranges, failed twice to put on socks without verbal hostility. Eva, meanwhile, turned out to be alarmingly competent. She assembled the crib with the kind of murderous concentration usually reserved for constitutional arguments. She read 3 books on childbirth and hated 2 of them on principle. She attended birthing classes with the face of a woman prepared to debate any instructor who used the phrase natural feminine instinct within striking distance. She learned how Lena liked her lower back rubbed during long evenings, and what angle of pillow arrangement made sleep least impossible. She also, to Lena's endless private delight, became irrationally protective. At 7.5 months, when a stranger in the pharmacy asked Lena if the father was still around, Eva answered from 2 feet away, "That depends entirely on your definition of father." The woman retreated so quickly, Lena nearly applauded. "Did you just threaten a stranger with syntax?" she asked once they got outside. Eva adjusted the scarf at Lena's throat. "I protected my family from stupidity." The word family landed between them both. Neither looked away from it. Lena reached for her hand. "I love you," she said. Eva's gaze softened into something that still, after all these months, could make Lena feel chosen down to the bone. "I know," she said. Then, with the tiniest ghost of a smile, "Fortunately, the feeling remains mutual." The baby came on a Tuesday at 2:14 in the morning, after Lena spent 6 hours insisting the contractions were probably digestive betrayal. They were not. Miriam drove because she insisted Eva was too emotionally compromised to be trusted with speed limits. Eva sat in the back seat with Lena, one hand on the curve of her stomach, the other wrapped around her fingers, and counted her breathing like a prayer. The labor was long, messy, painful. Nothing like the brochures. Everything like real life. Lena swore at medicine, God, architecture, and one specific ceiling tile. Eva remained beside her through every minute of it. Not composed now, not distant. Fiercely present, stripped of all professorly polish, holding Lena through fear and effort and those terrible stretched hours where the body becomes pure work. At one point, wrecked and shaking and certain she could not possibly continue, Lena grabbed the front of Eva's shirt and cried, "I can't do this!" Eva leaned down until their foreheads touched. "Yes," she said, voice breaking just enough to make it real. "You can. And I am here." When the baby finally arrived, screaming and furious at the whole arrangement, The room became strange and bright and impossible. A daughter. Dark hair, tiny clenched fist. Whole world. Lena cried. Miriam cried and denied it. Eva looked at the baby as if language had become temporarily insufficient. When the nurse placed her into Lena's arms, Lena laughed and sobbed at once. Then she looked at Eva. "Come here." Eva did. Lena tilted the baby slightly so they could both see her. The little face, the impossible size, the whole ferocious miracle of her. "She's ours," Lena whispered. Eva's eyes filled instantly. She did not look away, did not hide it. "Yes," she said. Later, when the nurses had gone and the room had fallen into that particular exhausted quiet reserved for women who have crossed one life and entered another, Eva sat on the edge of the hospital bed, holding their daughter against her shoulder with careful, stunned competence. The baby had finally gone still. Sleepy, warm, perfect. Lena watched them from the pillows and thought, there are some moments so complete they don't feel earned, only borrowed from a kinder world. Eva looked up and caught her staring. "What?" Lena smiled through the remnants of labor and tears and awe. "They told me to keep my life small," she said softly. "They told me to survive quietly. Like that was enough." Eva shifted the baby gently and came to sit closer. "It never was," she said. Lena looked down at her daughter, then up at the woman she loved. The professor who knocked on her door with groceries and impossible calm. The woman who held her hand at the ultrasound, fought a dean in a polished office, built a crib, learned contractions, and loved this baby before she ever had the chance to ask her to. "What if I'm still scared?" Lena asked. Eva kissed her forehead. Tender. Certain. Homemaking in the smallest possible gesture. "Then be scared," she murmured, "and let us love you anyway." The baby stirred between them. Lena laughed softly, a sleepy little helpless sound full of wonder. Outside the hospital window, dawn was just beginning. Pale light over the parking lot, a city waking up, an ordinary world that had no idea how completely Lena Hartz had changed. She had once believed pregnancy would make her life smaller, a closed thing, a narrowing. Instead, somehow, impossibly, it had opened. Into fear, yes, into hardship, into every practical difficulty she had predicted and a few she hadn't. But also into this. Into a woman who knocked. Into love that did not vanish when named. Into a daughter with dark hair and furious lungs, and a future wide enough, maybe, for all three of them. Years later, when their girl was old enough to ask how her mothers fell in love, Lena always told the respectable version first. The professor, the office, the winter, the soup. Eva always rolled her eyes at that and said, "That is not the true beginning." Then Lena would laugh and admit it. The true beginning was a knock on a cheap apartment door, a dark coat damp from rain, a grocery bag in one hand, and a woman who looked at the wreckage of Lena's life, looked directly at the fear, the bills, the nausea, the loneliness, the pregnancy, all of it, and chose not to step back. She stepped in. And because of that, everything that came after, every difficult, beautiful bit of it, became survivable. Lena had been pregnant and alone. Then her new professor knocked. And love, in the end, arrived exactly how she should have known it would. Not loudly, not perfectly, not in any shape the world would have recommended, but with groceries, with a list, with her hand held through the heartbeat, with a crib built in winter, with a daughter between them and a future neither of them had dared to ask for until it was already here. Sweet, terrifying, inconvenient, real. The best things usually are.